Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Reckoning of Roku chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 24, which is called All for Nothing. Once again, YouTube channel membership is enabled if you want to help support the channel, and subscribing also helps. But yeah, we're in a Sozin chapter. This is Sozin going into Wan Shi Tong's library, meeting Wan Shi Tong, and getting into the information. And there's some really cool references in here. There's one pretty big error which we will talk about, or at least it seems to be an error, but we'll discuss it. But the details here are pretty nice overall. It's a very good chapter. So we'll skip past the early stuff, because it's like Sozin going into the library, looking around a little bit. Anyone here? Something's coming towards him. I wonder, will I meet Wan Shi Tong? Wan Shi Tong's heading towards him. So Sozin and Wan Shi Tong kind of introduce themselves to each other. And Wan Shi Tong's reaction to finding out, oh, Prince Sozin is here, is basically, nobody from the Fire Nation has visited my library since Avatar Zito. And that was centuries ago. So, nice little detail. We're finding out these really interesting tidbits about Avatar Zito. Like, he grew up with his dragon from a young age. Like, when did that happen? You know, he's been to Wan Shi Tong's library. Like, what was he looking for there? And we get another reference to Zito not too long from now as well. So, interesting stuff. So, what does Sozin give to get into the library? It's a dark red dragon leather covered book. And this is Avatar Roku's childhood journal. And Wan Shi Tong comments on this of like, oh, I knew you were close to Roku, but I didn't know it was close enough that he would entrust you with such an intimate treasure. And we get in the narration that this didn't happen. Sozin has ordered Kozaru to steal this from Roku's house prior to them starting the mission, because he knew he would be going to Wan Shi Tong's library at the start, so he planned for the offering basically to get in. So pretty, you know, ooh, this is a questionable move on Sozin's part here, just stealing this and using it to get in. The one interesting detail here is Wan Shi Tong notes, to your credit at least, you did not read it. Don't know how much that really changes things, but okay, he didn't read it, okay, fair enough. But also it's like, oh, Wan Shi Tong, how do you know that? And that's an interesting little detail as well. Like, the fact that he's the knowledge spirit, like, what powers does that kind of give him? Because he seems to know this, but then there's other things that he maybe doesn't know, which is kind of interesting. So he asked the question, what do you seek within my library? Knowledge of firebending. You have already mastered firebending. But I also suspect your unrivaled collection contains much about firebending and all bending arts that very few know, perhaps even knowledge lost to my people over the years. And Wan Shi Tong agrees with this, like, yes, I have scrolls on the Dumog and Eskrima firebending styles, which your clans forgot about long ago. It would certainly be impressive to see a true revival of such skills. Now, I looked up these two words because it's Randy Rabai, so he's introducing kind of Filipino kind of culture into Avatar. These are, I believe, Filipino fighting styles, martial arts. I didn't look into them too much, partly because it's not really my style of analysis, because I'm very much like, if we were meant to read into them, I think they would explain what they necessarily were. Cool that we can maybe look into it a little bit more if we want more information, but also it's still hard to judge what exactly they mean. Brief analysis seems to be that Dumog is a kind of Filipino kind of wrestling, grappling style of fighting martial arts, and Eskrima is a knife-based martial arts fighting style. So the knife one makes sense for firebending, because we have a few techniques that involve creating kind of blades out of fire, so emphasizing that and the best way to use firebending for a kind of melee weapon is kind of interesting. Makes sense to kind of augment your weapons to a certain degree with fire. That's maybe what they're going for. I'm not sure about how fire grappling necessarily works, like wrestling style thing, because most of the time you associate firebending as being a ranged attack, and sure, like up close, but still separated a little bit. So is this about like super up close, like, you know, literally almost touching skin to skin, like firebending? Not really sure what to make of that, but I don't think we're maybe meant to read into it too much, because Sozin is here for other skills, not these older styles, but for techniques that have been lost with firebending that will make him more powerful overall. Now, he gets on Wan Shi Tong's good side here by like, you admire knowledge for knowledge's sake. I value firebending for firebending's sake. It's, you know, it's our people's birthright. It's our destiny. I want to learn it as an art form. And because of that, I want to learn everything possible. And Wan Shi Tong loves this. Like, he's in love. He loves Sozin's approach here, even though I think Sozin's very clearly lying to Wan Shi Tong to a certain degree. So he's like, yeah, absolutely. Tell my knowledge seekers what you need and they'll help you out, basically. But he says, my library will always be open to you if you agree to one more condition. And that condition is you must share with me all you have learned of your art. And should you master new techniques or new styles, I demand demonstrations. So very good terms here between Sozin and Wan Shi Tong. Basically, yeah, come back whenever you want. Just show me what you have learned. Prove to me that you actually do plan to make use of this stuff and bring these forms back, basically. So that's a bit of an interesting one. You kind of wondered, like, historically, does Sozin end up coming back? I'm guessing he probably does. But yeah, proceed, Prince Sozin of the Fire Nation. I will follow your development and that of your nation with considerable interest. Which I think is a very interesting and kind of almost ominous kind of thing, given what Sozin goes on to do, and in a way what Wan Shi Tong's history from this point on will be with regards to, you know, Zhao will go there, Zhao will ruin the relationship of Wan Shi Tong and humans, then Aang will go there and get a bit of a cold shoulder from Wan Shi Tong, and what happens there happens, and then what happens in Korra, of course. But from the RPG we know that in more modern times, Wan Shi Tong is becoming a little bit more open again to humans, and so we might see the return of the library to the physical world, but who knows. Scene cut at this point, and then we cut straight to Sozin in the books. The knowledge seekers have given him everything that he's asked for. He has books piled up next to him, tables upon tables of books. There's so much that he wants to get through, because he plans to spend like days in here, basically. He wants to get everything possible. He's so interested. He's been waiting for this for years. That's what we're talking about. Well, we get straight into the details here. Sozin learned of the training necessary to enhance the heat of his firebending until his flames burned iridescent. So there is the idea that he is getting confirmation that it is a trainable, learnable skill to increase the heat of your firebending to eventually change the color of your firebending. So it's not just a legend. These books have manuals, guides, treatises, and scrolls about how this stuff works. And remember, one interesting detail about this, Sozin apparently remembers every single thing he reads. We were told that much earlier on in the book. So everything he talks about here, like in the narration and stuff like that, he might not know every single detail in the book, but the idea is like he will remember everything he came across at the very least. So that's a bit of an interesting detail. So yeah, the changing of color thing, obviously it confirms super directly the idea of like, oh yeah, Azula trained to generate more heat, to have her fire be blue at all times, and it speaks to the control and power that she has, that it is actually a technique. So very interesting stuff there. He learned that there were methods of channeling his energy into lightning. So obviously the idea is, I'm guessing Sozin brings back a certain amount of knowledge about lightning, and either is this indirectly kind of confirming he does learn lightning himself, because I don't think it's confirmed we know that Sozin is a lightning bender. So we'd probably have to wait and see, like if we maybe jump into book 2 and maybe he has some control over lightning, that would be a cool reveal. But I'm guessing this is something he will invest his time into here, or at the very least, people after him in the family do, to the point where like Ozai has it, Iroh has it, Azula, and so on. So, that's interesting. This is an interesting line then. And methods for defending such strikes, so lightning strikes that borrowed from water bending redirection principles. Some people might be annoyed by that one, just because it's basically telling us that Iroh is not the first ever person in the history of the Avatar world to develop the technique of lightning redirection. Historically, someone else has that feat, the first ever person to do it. it still gives Iroh the feat of, in the 100-Year War era, basically, he is someone who seemed to learn this technique by himself in a vacuum. So it's still very impressive on Iroh's part that he did develop it. And we know him as an originator of this technique, even if someone has historically done it before. And I think that leans into the idea with lightning as well. It seems like lightning has this kind of, some people rediscover it, then it gets lost, and then some people rediscover it again. There's probably this all over the place with bending technique. Some people keep it hidden, it dies out for a while, but then someone else does manage to bring it back. Now, should they do this with every technique and reveal there was actually an ancient practitioner of it? Not sure necessarily, because obviously, like, they did this in the RPG where, like, Unalaq is not the first ever spirit bender type situation. The idea, I think, more so is the ones that I think people will probably want them to be very careful about is there like ancient blood benders? Is there ancient metal benders? As in, are Toph and Hama literally first ever in the history of the world? Or is it just they've rediscovered it after a very long time? I'd be interested to know what way they go about doing that overall. So that might be a discussion point for the comments for sure. He learned that even the temperature of the air or distant objects could be manipulated with enough energy, enough focus. So there's more of your heat manipulation, heat redirection. We saw Roku, of course, basically do this in the previous chapter, so it's definitely possible when you have the power. Sozin at least goes on to get some sort of a heat kind of redirection type thing, where he pulls heat out of lava to kind of make it solid again and redirects that heat kind of into the air. But the idea that apparently you can just raise the temperature of distant objects, that seems like a very powerful skill as demonstrated by Roku in the last chapter. That one could indeed learn to emit contained spurts of fire from their feet to fire flying propulsion, basically. That definitely, I think, is something he takes with him and either himself or people who come after him incorporate into their arsenal of moves, which is why, like, Azula uses it, it's why, like, Ozai knows how to use it, that sort of thing. He learned of the existence of the first dragons who could teach one to breathe fire. So, cool reference there, I guess, to Ran and Shaw. I wonder directly, like, are Ran and Shaw literally like the first ever dragons? Is that part of the lore, or is it like Ran and Shaw's like ancestors? I wonder what the details on that really are. But either way, it's clearly referred to the ancient Sun Warriors. As well as life-threatening procedures developed during the Yang Chen era, through which a firebender could learn to create targeted explosions of varying magnitude. So there's combustion bending, direct reference to the previous novels, Dawn and Legacy of Yang Chen. Now, that's a tricky one because Sozin himself is probably not going to want to deal with that procedure because there's a high likelihood of dying no matter who you are. It just seems like you have to go through hundreds of people just to get one almost. But the idea that he seems to take this knowledge from the library at least opens the door to how, say, Combustion Man will come into existence, Pali in the future, that it's not just forgotten with the Yang Chen era kind of Project Unanimity stuff. So that's an interesting lore detail there. Then we get the kind of reality of this. Like, it's one thing to read that these techniques are possible to learn, which is what Sozin has learned here. It's another to actually master it. No more than reading about someone ascending a mountain was the same as making that ascent yourself. It would require years of dedicated training and meditation to master any single one of these abilities, a lifetime to master a handful. And he thinks about the future of, like, I'm going to be Fire Lord. I'm not going to have all the time in the world to devote to training. I'm going to have to do other stuff as well. I would have to be selective about what I decide to pursue and in what order. So you kind of run through the list there and are thinking about, oh yeah, which of these techniques does he definitely go for? Definitely add some heat manipulation stuff into his arsenal, definitely. I'm assuming lightning is involved. I assume a little bit of fire flying comes in. And he probably attempts to increase the heat of his fire as well. Maybe does he need it to turn a different color? We're not really sure. But, you know, the idea is a little bit of everything here. But you can tell maybe that lightning redirection probably isn't something he focuses on. That, like, hey, how often am I going to come across other lightning benders? I'm going to go on the offense, not the defense, that sort of idea. You can see maybe where he places his focus of like, he's not going to go into combustion bending, but yeah, heat redirection and stuff like that. Yeah, I want that. Another detail in this is that it mentions here, only fire avatars like Zito had developed a mastery over several of the powers. So that's an interesting detail. Or had wielded them at some point or another throughout their lives while in the avatar state. So that's super interesting. So they're obviously highlighting, yeah, for a fire avatar, I guess it really is any avatar, but I guess fire avatars would specifically maybe lean in the direction of learning more fire techniques, and for him that's maybe what matters. Leaning into much more of these specific techniques, like that you can basically, you have easier access to those techniques in the avatar state, which we've sort of seen with the blue fire that like Roku used in the previous chapter. So I'm very interested to know like the whole idea of like Zito, like does this confirm that he actually knew some of these techniques himself? Like, are they saying Zito could use lightning, or that he could use lightning in the avatar state? Like, there's a few interesting ideas because of the way it's worded there. But anyway, more Zito information is always interesting. So moving on from there, yeah, we just get the idea. The books once again pile up more and more. He then shifts his focus from specific firebending techniques to conditions in the natural world that impacted firebending. So we get the basics that he already knows, is that like if you're near the equator or the sun is in the sky, firebenders are quite powerful, and they're weaker if there's a solar eclipse, of course, or if you're near the poles. Makes sense. But he learned about, basically the idea here is solar flares are things that firebenders can tap into and to increase their power, but they're unpredictable. So that's maybe something more for the very future of Avatar, where solar flares can maybe more be predicted and taken advantage of. But they note here that more dependably, you could tap into the energy of a close passing celestial object like the Great Comet to magnify the strength of their bending, but that the next time the Great Comet passed wouldn't be for another 44 years. So straight away, interesting stuff here. This is Sozin learning about the comet that's going to be named after him one day. So he gets confirmation here that yes, the comet can be used to give firebenders enhanced firebending, so long as the comet is actually in the sky overhead. Now, the error here is the 44-year part, because this is 16-year-old Sozin at this point in the book. 44 years on, Sozin is going to be 60, meaning Roku will be 60. And straight away, the fact that Roku is involved creates a problem. The next time the comet comes around, because as far as we're aware, the comet's every 100 years. So the next iteration of the comet should be the time he uses it to perform the air nomad genocide and start the war, which happens after Roku's death, when Sozin is 82, 12 years after Roku's death, when Aang is 12. And the timing of that has to be, of course, Aang runs away, gets trapped in ice, then Sozin launches his attack. And this creates the last airbender situation that is the premise, effectively, of the entire franchise. So for this to work, this number should be 66. That way it's 16 plus 66 is 82. That's the age when he actually uses the comet. This is saying that 22 years ahead of when he has to use the comet, apparently the comet's also coming. So is it just a mistake, or is this purposeful and they're doing something different with the comet? Are they retconning some details here to make something weird happen? Are they setting up some greater plot point that maybe book 2 will go into about, you know, how Sozin really leans into the idea that I'm going to use the comet someday? We don't know, and it's hard to tell if they'll ever confirm if it is or isn't a mistake. We'll maybe just have to wait and see what happens with that. But I think the main point is that most people who I've seen and comment on my videos acknowledging this have said that, like, yeah, I read that and I raised an eyebrow. I didn't know what to make of it. I immediately thought error, but surely not. It's like an Avatar Studio. Avatar Studios is so heavily involved in these books. Surely there's no way they make an error about such an essential date. 0 AG, 0 BG, the center point of like the timeline, effectively, this incident. there's no way they're messing around with this, but this seems to have potentially happened, and these mistakes sometimes do just happen. So it's one to keep an eye out for. Again, I have a separate video talking about this in a lot more detail, but I did want to just comment on it in this video also. So an update from the future. Randy Rabai, the author, did comment on this issue about the error, and as you can see here, he says, extra credit to those who caught the typo in the Reckoning of Roku regarding the comet timeline. This will be corrected in future reprints. Now, while he doesn't go into excessive detail about what the error is and what it will be corrected to, the assumption here probably is just that, like most of us, we are aware of what the error is. 44 is not the correct number. 66 should be the number to make it fit everything. So that's my takeaway on this, is that it's just confirmation. For whatever reason, Avatar Studios, the whole process didn't catch that this was an error, and that it will get corrected from 44 to 66 years to fix this in future print editions of the book. Going to be a bit of a tough one there for people to actually get a copy maybe that has that, at least anytime soon. But at least we have a resolution to this, and we know it is just an error. Strong communication is always great to see, and it being so relatively quick, especially after I posted my main video, like highlighting it to a lot of people, was good to see. So we move on from it now that we know what the situation is. We'll move on from that and just accept, okay, it's probably a mistake for now. But then we go from the things that he kind of I thought was the case and are now confirmed to be true, to the things I thought were the case but are actually wrong. So what does the library confirm is wrong from legends? Slaying a dragon, for instance, did not increase the strength of one's firebending by 1,000-fold. In fact, it did not have any impact beyond the loss of a sacred beast's life that angered the other dragons and disturbed their spiritual kin and the fire sages. So that's a super interesting detail for Sozin to learn about. That basically in around 12 years from now, he is going to bring into play the practice of hunting dragons for this reason. Now, it's obviously a bit of a power play that he makes to distract people from other things and kind of show that he is this new Fire Lord, that he's the one in charge, and that you can earn power, you can follow me by, slaying a dragon and becoming a dragon yourself type thing. But he does it knowing that it is just, basically just asking for the death of these really important creatures. And especially because he learns here that it affects the spirit world. This angers their spiritual kin. Now, I wonder what that means. Do they just mean spirits there, or do they mean specifically dragon spirits? Because there's a variety of different types of dragon spirits. Is that what they mean? But of course, the fire sages are going to be impacted by this as well. And from the RPG, we know that the Fire Nation becomes a little bit spiritually tainted when there are sites where dragons have been killed in this way. And I wonder how this plays into the idea of the timing of when Roku and Sozin get their dragons. And does that play any sort of a role? Does Sozin find his dragon, Roku gets his, and he realizes, I don't need anyone else getting a dragon. Dragons are a threat to me. So I'm going to have other dragons hunted down. And so the only dragons I really need to deal with are my own one, which I'm in control of, and then Roku's dragon. But we're friends, that I'm not going to have to deal with his dragon. I'd love to know the details of the whole dragon situation ultimately. The other mistake is that though a firebender could learn to heat rock until it transformed into lava, the ability to bend lava belonged to skilled earthbenders. And I think the point that they're making here is, don't just assume that because something related to heat is happening that it means it's a firebending technique. No, they're pointing out this obvious thing of, if you pump heat into a piece of earth long enough, it's going to turn into lava, because that's what lava is. You're not bending the earth to make it lava. You're not lava bending, because you have to do a different fire technique to reverse that process, basically. And in the whole process of this, you can never really move it yourself. So you're not actually lava bending that way. Whereas earthbenders can make the shift from lava to earth happen and back, and move it in earth form and lava form and do all of that stuff. It's the same kind of point as firebending isn't involved in waterbending, even though waterbenders can transform ice into water, water into steam, and back and forth. A heat thing is happening, but it's happening because they're bending it to make the phase change happen, and the heat is just like a physics effect happening. And I think a lot of people need to get that into their heads when it comes to this stuff. I assume we will still see people thinking that like it's confirmed that you need to have a fire parent involved in anyone who ends up being a lava bender, which I don't think is actually meant to be the case. But anyway, we'll move on. The next thing he's given, so the final thing that he's wrong about, is not really related to techniques. It's about the sort of legend that started this whole thing. The legend of the traveler Asho. So the knowledge seeker drops off a scroll to him. It's from the Zito era. I don't think they explain that it's written by Zito, it's just from that era. The title of this scroll is A Correction in Response to the Many Dangerous Falsehoods Perpetuated by the Dishonest Traveler, supposedly named Asho. And Sozin is like, uh-oh, the legend is wrong in some way. And he starts to read it. Fear crept over as he read. Over Sozin as he read. Asho had gotten it all wrong, and Roku's life was in danger for nothing. So straight away, what's going on here? What has he read in this? You get a slight sense of there's certain things we've already learned from our time on the island that are different than what Sozin assumed to be the case. But what is actually in this? What does Sozin think has gone horribly wrong here? But the idea here is he now has a choice to make. Does he rush out of the library to go and save Roku? Or does he stay here and take full advantage of, I'm in the library right now, I can spend a week here or something like that, get everything I possibly need, and in just one trip, I'll have all of this information that will like secure the Fire Nation's future as an amazing nation going forward, that this will make things happen immediately, or do I leave now, save Roku and come back some other time? He makes the choice here. He's leaving. He's going to go and save Roku. Because he got Roku into this mess. He's going to get his friend out. And at least you can give Sozin that sort of a credit here. He makes a choice in this moment to side with his friend over the pursuit of like knowledge that will get him power. But I think it's an easy enough choice because Wan Shi Tong has basically said you can come back. Now, maybe it's the idea of like, does he have to master one of these techniques before he's allowed back in? Maybe that's a little bit of a twist to it, but I don't think they really said it that way. Final scene here is Sozin climbs out of the library and speaks to Dalasai and Kozaru out here. They're shocked he's out after less than a day. They were expecting it to be a whole lot longer. Dalasai is complaining that, did you not learn anything about metallurgy? Did you not bring any scrolls out? But he points out that, yes, stealing from the library is forbidden, and it results in an eternal ban. And he's like, we need to go quickly. Dalasai, is there any way where we can get our hands on some eel hounds really quickly? So he wants to go super quickly to get to this island here. And yeah, we just get to... One interesting detail from Dalasai right at the end here is like, you focused on firebending, but in the future, the world will belong to those who best understand the sciences, not to those with fancy firebending tricks, good for little beyond winning Agni Kais and impressing girls. And it's an interesting one. She's definitely thinking about the future of like technology will be the key to victory in the future. And you're not maybe thinking about that. And we'll see kind of a return to this towards the end of the book, but it's an interesting thing that Dalasai showing her intelligence here, like immediately with thinking about the bigger picture. But yeah, they just, get the sandbenders back. They head out of the desert. He's heading for Roku to try and save him from the mess he has gotten his friend into here. So Sozin attempting to sort of redeem himself here, but also Sozin is on his way back to the island, which is a very interesting kind of plot detail here. So an information-dense chapter because we went to the library that has all the interesting information here. So, of course, references to a little bit of everything when it comes to firebending techniques, and the big question of like, okay, which ones of these techniques is Sozin going to really lean into? Because they literally state in his life, he's probably only going to have time to learn a couple of these techniques. Which ones will he focus on? How much information does he bring back to the Fire Nation that helps them going into the future? Some very interesting stuff overall here. Also the fact that like he learns about like the comet and other ways to empower firebending, and you know, accounting for the error, like he finds out when the comet is coming back. That's interesting. But then you have the mixed idea of, on the good side of things, he's rushing to go and save Roku as soon as possible. But on the bad side of things, he stole his friend's childhood journal to get into the library in the first place. Like, you have some real, like, what are you doing, Sozin? Like, I know you become the villain of the franchise going forward, but there's a real, like, you didn't have to go down this path type thing going on here. So, interesting stuff. Lots of references, including some nice Zito references here as well. So, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this stuff. I suppose, what were some of your favorite information references in this chapter? What did you make of getting to see Wan Shi Tong's library in the Roku era? Just discuss everything about this chapter. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.